Do you think you have a high pain tolerance? A paper cut, stubbing your toe on the coffee table, or maybe a toothache that keeps you up at night? Forget all of that. Today, we're stepping into a museum of horror, where screams are music and agony is an art form. Welcome to the world of history's most brutal punishments. What you are about to hear isn't a horror movie. These are nightmares that actually happen to flesh and blood human beings. Do you have the stomach to make it to the end of the list, where death is considered a luxury? Let's start light. First up is the Yubitsume ritual of the Japanese Yakuza. It sounds cool in movies, but the reality is bloody. To earn forgiveness, a gang member must place his own pinky finger on a white cloth, take a sharp knife, and chop. The severed joint is wrapped up and offered to the boss as an eternal apology. Why the pinky? Because without it, you can't grip a sword tightly, making you completely dependent on the organization for protection. Painful? Yes, but you're still alive. Trust me, this is just the warm-up act for today's bloody banquet. Next is bastonado. Don't let the fancy name fool you. This is the technique of beating the soles of the feet, where the body's nerve endings are most densely packed. The victim is suspended, and a cane is whipped across their feet repeatedly. It doesn't break bones immediately, but it turns walking into torture. The feet swell, split open, and every step taken afterward feels like walking on hot coals. The goal isn't to kill, but to make every step a painful reminder of your mistake. But what if they want to leave a permanent mark on your head? Enter pitch capping. Imagine a conical paper hat filled with boiling hot tar. They jam this melting nightmare onto your head. The scalding tar eats into the scalp, burning the hair follicles. And the worst part? Once the tar cools and hardens, they rip the hat off. Rip. The entire scalp, hair, and skin come off with it, leaving a raw, bleeding skull. The victim bears this gruesome scar for life, a death sentence for their dignity. We move to Asia, where Indian kings turned gentle giants into executioners. Gunga Rao, elephant crushing. There were 2 tickets for this show. If you were lucky, the elephant would step on your head and crunch. It's over in a second. But if the king wanted entertainment, he would order the handler to have the elephant crush your limbs one by one. First the legs, then the thighs. The sound of shattering bones mixed with screams created a barbaric symphony, a 5-ton beast playing with your broken body for hours before granting you the final mercy. Back in ancient Rome, those who killed their fathers received a special ticket called poena culae. You were sewn into a leather sack, but you weren't alone. You were trapped inside with a starving dog, a venomous snake, a monkey, and a rooster. Then, the whole chaotic sack was thrown into the sea. In that cramped, drowning darkness, the panicked animals would claw and bite you while you all sank to the bottom. Drowning or being eaten alive in the dark? Which would you choose? You think military brotherhood is sacred? The Romans thought differently with decimation. When a unit acted cowardly, they were divided into groups of 10 and drew straws. The unlucky soldier who drew the shortest straw was beaten to death by his 9 best friends using clubs or stones. The cruelty here wasn't the death, it was the psychology. The survivors had to carry the guilt of murdering their brother for the rest of their lives, a lottery where no one wins. Fast forward to the 19th century, British colonialists in India invented blowing from a gun. The victim was tied across the mouth of a cannon. When the fuse was lit, boom, there was no body left. A soldier described the head flying 50 feet into the air, limbs scattered over 100 yards, and the torso turning into a red mist. Quick and painless? Maybe, but visually traumatizing for anyone watching? History is full of cruelty, but Byzantine Emperor Basil II took it to a new level. After capturing 15,000 Bulgarian prisoners, he didn't just kill them, he divided them into groups of 100. He blinded 99 of them completely. The 100th man was left with one eye, just one, so he could lead the other 99 back home. Imagine an army of 15,000 blind, stumbling, weeping men marching back to their country. The Bulgarian Tsar, Samuel, upon seeing this horrific sight, reportedly suffered a heart attack and died on the spot. Psychological warfare at its peak. If they didn't want to spill blood, they used immurement, being walled up alive. You are placed in a tiny niche, and brick by brick, the wall closes you in. Darkness falls. The air gets thin. If it was a death sentence, you starved in solitude, listening to rats scratching outside. If it was life imprisonment, they left a small hole to toss in food, turning you into a forgotten creature living in your own filth until your bones turned to dust. The rack. The nightmare of medieval Europe. It looks simple. A wooden frame with rollers. Your hands and feet are tied to opposite ends. As the executioner turns the handle, your body is stretched. Click, click. The ropes tighten. And then, pop! Your shoulders and hips are ripped out of their sockets. Ligaments snap like over-tightened guitar strings. If they keep turning, limbs can be torn completely off. You might be a few inches taller, but the price is permanent paralysis. Sometimes, the goal was public humiliation. That's where tearing and feathering comes in. The victim is stripped and doused in boiling hot tar. The skin blisters and burns, fusing with the black sludge. Then, they are rolled in a pile of feathers. The result? A giant, grotesque human chicken paraded through the streets for the mob to mock. When the tar cooled and stuck to the skin, peeling it off meant peeling off the flesh underneath. A perfect combination of physical agony and the death of one's reputation. Now, let's talk about cold metal. The choke pear, or pear of anguish, a metal device shaped like a pear that expands when a screw is turned. It was shoved into the mouth, or other sensitive places. When the executioner turned the key, the metal petals bloomed, shattering teeth, breaking jaws, or destroying internal organs. You couldn't scream, you couldn't cry. Just internal, shattering silence. Meanwhile, across the ocean, the Aztecs performed the bloodiest rituals for the sun god. The victim lay on a stone, and a priest used an obsidian knife, sharper than a surgeon's scalpel, to slice open the abdomen. No anesthesia. With practiced skill, they reached into the chest, ripped out the still beating heart, and held it up to the sky. The victim might still be conscious for those final few seconds, watching their own heart being offered to a thirsty god. Part 8. The Fork of Insomnia and the Burrowing Rats. Have you ever been so tired you couldn't function? The heretic's fork turned sleep into a death sentence. A leather strap secured a double-ended metal fork to your neck, one end against your sternum, the other right under your chin. If you dropped your head to sleep, stab. The prongs pierced your chin and chest. You were forced to stay awake, eyes wide open, day after day, until you collapsed into madness and your own death. But the true stuff of nightmares is rat torture. Emperor Nero loved this, as did medieval dungeons. A metal bucket filled with starving rats is strapped upside down onto the victim's bare stomach. Then the executioner lights a fire on the bottom of the bucket. Panicked by the heat, the rats have only one way to escape: digging through you. The sensation of claws tearing skin and sharp teeth gnawing through your intestines to hide from the fire. It is a death so disgusting that no words can do it justice. Catherine's wheel. The victim is tied to the spokes of a large wooden wagon wheel. The executioner uses a sledgehammer to smash every bone in the body, one by one. Shins, thighs, arms. The goal is to shatter the bones without killing the victim immediately. Once the body is a bag of jelly, they weave the broken limbs through the spokes and hoist the wheel up on a pole for the birds and the sun to finish the job. You die slowly, over days, in absolute agony. Or do you prefer a hot bath? Boiling alive will satisfy that need. You are lowered slowly into a vat of boiling oil, or cold water that is slowly heated. The skin cooks, blisters, and peels away. The fat renders. The nerves are burned raw before being destroyed. The horror is that you can feel your own body being cooked from the outside in. A slow, smelly, deep bone pain. Sailors feared keel hauling more than anything. You were tied to a rope, thrown overboard, and dragged under the ship from one side to the other, passing across the keel, the bottom of the ship. The hull was covered in barnacles, sharp as razors. When or if you were pulled up, your body looked like it had gone through a giant cheese grater. The salt water in the shreds of your skin, if you were still breathing, they'd say, "Do it again." On land, sawing offered a different experience. The victim was hung upside down, legs spread. Two executioners used a massive lumber saw to slice the body in half, starting from the crotch. Why upside down? To keep the blood rushing to the brain, keeping you awake as long as possible. You would see and feel the saw grinding through your pelvis, your stomach, your chest. Records say some victims were still screaming when the saw hit their navel. A brutal division in the most literal sense. Hanged, drawn, and quartered. The British specialty for treason. A three-step process. First, you are hanged, but cut down before you die. While you are gasping for air, they slice you open, pull out your intestines, and burn them in front of your eyes. Finally, your body is chopped into 4 pieces and displayed at the city gates. Even Braveheart himself, William Wallace, suffered this fate. And I must warn you, this next part is hard to hear. The glass rod. A thin glass rod inserted into the male urethra. Then, the executioner smashes it with a hammer from the outside. The glass shatters into thousands of tiny shards inside the most sensitive part of the male anatomy. The internal shredding and agony make death feel like a sweet dream. Similarly, bamboo torture involved placing a sharp bamboo shoot under a victim. Bamboo grows incredibly fast, inches a day, slowly impaling the victim through the intestines over several days. Nature is terrifying. The Spanish donkey, a sharp, triangular wooden wedge standing on legs. The victim is forced to sit on the sharp edge, with heavy weights tied to their feet. Gravity pulls the body down, and the wedge slowly slices through the crotch, splitting the victim in half upwards. Simple, elegant, and utterly demonic. But the pinnacle of torture art has to be the brazen bull, a hollow bronze bull statue. The victim is locked inside, and a fire is lit underneath. The metal heats up, turning it into an oven. But the genius was in the acoustic pipes in the bull's throat. They converted the victim's desperate, dying screams into the sound of a furious bull bellowing. The crowd outside cheered at the sound, while inside, a human being was roasting in darkness and despair, flaying or skinning alive. The executioner skillfully used a small knife to separate the entire skin from the body, like peeling an orange, keeping the victim alive as long as possible. Without skin, raw nerves are exposed to the air, causing shockwaves of pain. Victims usually died of infection or hypothermia, but the process could last for days.